All right, welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex Podcast, the PGA edition. I am your host, Bryan. I am joined, as always, by Colin Davey and Peter Jennings, a.k.a. CSU Ram 88. In this podcast, we are going to spend a couple minutes and break down what ended up being an exciting British Open, even though Jordan Spieth had a nice lead, and I guess if you watched it, he stumbled on the front nine and then had quite an epic back nine. So it ended up being a nice tournament to watch on Sunday. So we'll go over that in our process of picking golfers and how things ended up with ownership levels, and then we'll obviously jump in and break down the Canadian Open, which should be an interesting tournament as well. Again, I'm joined by Colin and Pete. Colin, what's happening, man?
You know, majors are interesting enough week to week, but it's so rare that we just straight up get a catchphrase out of it that just has applicability throughout life. So I'm all excited for my next round. I will settle. I'm not going to hit an eagle next night or anything, so I'll settle for next time I hit a birdie. Whoever my buddies I'm playing with, I'm just going to point and say, "Go get that." That may have been the greatest walking away from an explosion moment in golf. I have just never. That was on a different level. Oh, that was so great. I hope you guys got as much out of that moment as I did.
It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was epic for sure. And it was a good Open. Not the best results, even though it was Chalk City. I feel like there's one of those weeks where I regretted not using my usual process. My cash game team was 6 of 6. I actually rolled 2 cash games teams. Both teams were 6 of 6. And then the tournaments and the Thunderdome in particular, I didn't have a single team get 6 of 6 through because I tried to get creative pivoting away from the chalk. But everyone hit Spieth, Cabrera Bello. It was Chalk City. So that's normally what I've done in the past. And I understand that golf is, a game with so much short-term variance. But I still think that we haven't figured out exactly the blend of chalk to contrarian, because we don't know exactly the difference in equity between some of these guys. And I know that's a process we're going to continue to work on, but it was a frustrating week for me for sure, but I'm excited for the Canadian Open.
Yeah, I mean, it was a weird leaderboard, going into Saturday with the cut. I mean, the top 15 guys on the leaderboard were all pretty much the top 15 guys in the world. I mean, DJ, Rory were up there, Spieth. It was just completely loaded. So anytime the chalk hits like that, it makes for an interesting week. Pete, I'm curious your thoughts, because Colin and I did this live show on Wednesday that you were able to be on. I'm curious how much you took the weather angle, because we identified that as something that was pretty big, and I think that Jordan did get a nice jump because he didn't necessarily have to deal with a lot of it on Thursday and Friday, especially those really high winds during the midday on Friday. But then other guys, especially a lot of the high stakes guys that you played with against the Thunderdome, it didn't seem like people took the weather angle that much.
Well, I thought there was 2 kind of weather angles. I thought just avoiding guys in the middle of the day was the most critical part for Friday. So I actually liked guys like Ross Fisher, which I had a decent bit of him. I wish I would have had more, obviously being results oriented, but I like the guys super early teeing off on Friday, and I like the guys teeing off at the late end of Friday. So I took a pretty big stance on it. Led to a good amount of Brendan Steele, which hurt me too. But I thought it was a pretty big angle relatively. And if you saw what people did in the middle of Friday, I think it definitely was correct.
Yeah. Brendan Steele and Pat Perez were the ones that hurt me. Colin, any last thoughts on the British?
No, it's just I feel like we say a lot of times, all right, it was a chalky week. What are you going to do? And that statistically is correct, because chalk is chalk for a reason. Right. More often than not, chalk hits, and we're trying to do an improbable thing to begin with. I think the only thing that, especially in majors, the only thing that I'm really questioning, do I need to get a better handle on, is are majors just different than your standard week-to-week golf tournaments? I think they are. I think the fact that Spieth keeps showing up here and just overperforming majors. And for that matter, at this rate, so is Brooks Koepka, actually, if you look at his slate of last 12 majors. That just question of do people show up differently for majors, yes or no? And is that statistically viable, is something that I need to take a better look at. Not just, if nothing else, just because I guess the 4 times that there's, you can win $1 million playing DFS golf. And so it deserves extra scrutiny just because the payoffs are so much higher. And I think that's just something I need to revisit and try to figure out. Like
whether it's okay to be more chalky in majors.
Or yeah, like not even just more chalky, or just like basically like, do the big names show up even more during majors? Do they care if someone has smashed during majors? It's kind of like the similar thing in tennis, like Grand Slams. Do people show up for the big ones more than the little ones, and is that something that you can bank on?
Yeah, subjectively, it does seem like that's the case, but yeah, it would be really interesting to see a study on that.
Last comment too on that, and I agree with you. I think that in general, I am definitely a believer, especially in like millionaire makers and tournaments, you got to find those contrarian leverage plays. It's critical. But in the majors, for something like the Thunderdome, and this is what I'm just going to continue to think about, something like Matt Kuchar, even though I know he's going to be chalk, his equity is just so high in some of these situations, because in the majors, you get some of these golfers just priced so low down. So when you get someone who's as consistent as someone like Kuchar, who's going to make as many cuts, I'm starting to wonder if there's more merit to just like kind of jamming those guys in and trying to find leverage elsewhere and trying to pivot away from it. So that's what I was really trying to say is I regret not having a lot of Kuchar, because he was the number one equity guy in my model. And obviously that sounds results oriented, but Cabrera, Bello, Fisher, and Kuchar were like far and away the best guys for their price relative to market values and the model I had. And I went away from them in tournaments to be contrarian. So it's a results-oriented take, but I'm not really sure exactly where that like blend of equity to leverage is, and if you can find leverage elsewhere. So, Colin, what are your final thoughts on that? Something like Kuchar and some of these majors, we see these guys just massively underpriced relative to where they should be.
I don't know. I might like this may be the hill that I die on, just like straight up disagreeing. Only, but I think my consistent through line has been everybody overestimates their ability to calculate golfers' equity in tournaments, just because it's such a noisy process and such an inherently noisy sport. That I may have blinders on in this one. But I think just even from a game theory perspective, if you want to figure out like what are the mistakes that a field is doing, I'm guessing that everyone else is wildly overestimating someone's equity in a tournament as well. And like, I think that's a common flaw that everyone says that sees in DFS. So like, I'm probably going to be on this contrarian bent for a while, saying like, if you just take if you take it to extremes, like everybody can calculate equity perfectly. So you need those like 2 or 3 core guys versus like, it's so random that no one knows anything. I have to believe the latter is more correct, all else being equal. Yeah, there are spots where you can stray, but just like I think foundationally, believing that golf is basically like more random than predictable to start is a better foundation. So we're on the same page basically. It's just a question of waiting and stuff like that. But like as much just for how much time I've spent just like buried in the numbers, it's tough to get an accurate bead on like this guy has way more equity, like in terms of, like 10, 20, 30% than others.
Also, like, I think a good question is like, what do we mean by equity? Because I agree that Kuchar, Pete, he had so much equity in terms of like making the cut. Like he's just a grinder. Like he just doesn't miss cuts. He's really solid. But like at over 30% owned, like where do you need him to finish to be worth it in GPPs? Obviously a second place is worth it, but if he was, 30th place, all of a sudden, like it's a worthwhile fade, right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm struggling with trying to figure out some of these guys who, Kuchar in particular is the one that I'm really trying to figure out, because if you look at like his market rate to like make the cut, it was just, his cut percentage to make was higher than almost everyone in like it was higher than everyone else in the 7K range. It was higher than almost everyone else in the 8K range. And then you get into the 9K range and he's higher than some of those guys and he's 7,200. Yeah. So just like his making the cut, and that's a pretty efficient market metric. Just looking at that, that's what makes me kind of question my process a little bit. So I'm still trying to figure it out. I think there's a lot of ways to go. I have no issue fading him in something like the Millionaire Maker, but Thunderdome is really what I've been thinking about, something that pays 20% of the field. That still has incentive to shoot for first place, but there's definitely less leverage in something like the Millionaire Maker, where a third of the payout is in first place.
Yep, that's a good point.
So let me equivocate. Then Thunderdome is a completely separate question.
Yeah, it's a different animal.
Yeah, it's closer to like a sit and poker analogy. Is closer to a sit and go versus a multi-table tournament in terms of your decisions and equity and like what do you get from all of that. So completely agree. I think solving sit and goes is maybe after GPPs is kind of like like smaller tournaments is the more next interesting blend of equity versus contrariness. 100% agree.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, good conversation. All right, let's get into this week's tournament. This is the RBC Canadian Open. Obviously, it is played in Canada and Ontario at Glen Abbey Golf Course. It has been here for quite a bit. Actually hosted like 22 tournaments in a row here at Glen Abbey. But then in 2000, they started having a bit of a rotation, but they have played it at Glen Abbey the last couple of years. It's here pretty often. So we do have at least a good amount of data on it. A little bit of changes recently. They've changed some of their grass. They've changed it from, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, POA to bent grass.
Poana. It's the vicious weed.
Yeah. So they changed it from that to bent grass, which is new this year, I believe. So Pete might have a take on what that does to affect things. But of note, this tournament really is really easy to score. Golfers crush it. A lot of birdies in some eagles. Really easy to take advantage of some of these par fours and par fives. So, Colin, I'll kick it to you. What sort of golfers fit Glen Abbey?
So this is a weird one because the straight up answer is I don't know. So, and here's what I mean by that. So like we have basically 3 tournaments within our 5-year window, 13, 15, 16. 13, 15, it played pretty much as an accuracy course. And 16, it played as a distance course, like clear as night and day. And I don't know like how to resolve that yet. I looked at 16. There's nothing inherently like, oh, it was rainy or it was like extra windy, so it carried as mud. Or it's like the course didn't look different. So I don't know if that's a fluke or just like it's a little bit noisier because we only have 3 years of data versus 5 years of data. The generic top line stats don't really tell me much either. It's a par 72, but we've seen both angles on par 72. Mm-hmm. It's not like, I don't think it's obscenely long. Like it's 7,200 yards. It plays it sounds like a pretty standard par 72.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of at a loss on this one, and I don't really have a strong course fit. By far the weakest I've seen all year, and not just weakest, but contradictory in the past. So I don't know. The data isn't super helpful in this one. So anybody got a tiebreaker?
Yeah, I mean it really is interesting. If you just sort of look at like trends, golfers that have distance have performed well here. But yeah, I mean the interesting part is that it's like moderate. I mean it's not like super long. It's like moderately long at 72.53. But interestingly enough, all 4 par 5 holes play less than 560 yards. So it's like sort of long, but the par 5s are not long. So that's sort of an interesting dynamic. Pete, any thoughts on Glen Abbey?
Not too many thoughts here. I do think that I'm going to lean more distance than accuracy here just because I think it's a birdies course where you can get a ton of birdies. And in general, these guys who have a little more distance can do well. We'll get into plays, but I love guys like Tony Finau, who's ranking really well in terms of birdie or better percentage. And if you look at guys who make a lot of birdies, most of them are a little bit longer. So in that regard, I'm going to go more towards that, but it's not like a strong course fit like we have in other situations. So it's a tough one to analyze. I can see where Colin's coming from, but given the way DraftKings sets up their scoring, I think it makes a lot of sense to just lean a little bit more distance.
Yeah. Quick shout out to one of our writers, Kelly McCann. He does a course breakdown every week, and that just went up this morning on Tuesday morning. And what he does is he gets the notable long-term metrics that we have in our models, adjusted round score, distance, accuracy, all that stuff. And he looks at how the top 20% of golfers have done in each metric. And this number is just ridiculous. Golfers that have played at Glen Abbey who have ranked in the top 20% in terms of birdies per tournament have a plus 21.05 plus minus. So really, Colin, I'm curious, like it doesn't matter whether you do distance or accuracy. However guys get birdies, those are the guys you want.
Yeah, I mean we're nothing but the cutting edge analysis on here. Birdies are good.
Right.
Like go for like bird. I mean, like, and there's some element of truth to it, but like,
yeah, not not groundbreaking stuff here, but it is important to know if you're just go really heavy on birdies in your model when you're weighting stuff. Colin, the last question. I don't know if you have an answer to this, but we talked about guys going from the John Deere versus the Scottish to the British. Is there anything that we know, or we could even like subjectively think about, of guys that are coming from the British back to Canada versus guys who were playing over here at the Barbasol?
I mean, all else being equal, you would expect like jet lag to affect like the British people. To my knowledge, there's nothing been done looking at players after the British instead of before the British. And I don't think it's an apples to apples, just like treated exactly the same way, just because like there's so many confounding variables. Like when you look at like British Open prep, everything from like prepping for the style of the course to the time zone change to just like everything about it. So like, I don't know. I'm sure there's something there. I don't know that I'm going to be doing anything with it just because it's like inconclusive as best. But I mean, like, I could believe there's something there. I just don't know what it would be.
Fair enough. Okay. All right. Well, let's jump into the field here. It is an interesting field. We do have, some power up top, specifically Dustin Johnson at 12-2. He's the highest priced golfer. And then Matt Kuchar, coming off the second place finish at the British, is right below him at 11-4. Those are the two highest priced guys. Let's look at some of these high-priced guys and talk about, sort of what we're going to do, because it is another interesting week where DJ especially, but even if you could sort of group him and Kuchar, if we're talking about equity in terms of winning and just like recent play and birdie prowess, these guys are going to be a little hard to get off on. Specifically, DJ, if you look at his long-term adjusted birdies per tournament, he's at 15.5. Which is nearly two more than any other golfer who are all in like the mid 13 down range. So, I mean, if we're looking at birdies in odds to win the tournament, it's really hard to get off DJ, but I guess we have to factor in ownership. Pete, what are your thoughts on DJ sort of versus the field?
He showed some signs at the Open, which were good to see, but I'm not sure exactly what to do with him. Obviously, I think he's going to end up being pretty chalk, given that he's the one big name in the field. I'm curious the performance that Matt Kuchar just had at the Open, how much he's going to soak up ownership. So it's really going to try to figure out what to do with those two. My favorite plays, just in general, are below them. I really, like I mentioned, I really love Finau. I think there's a lot of value kind of in this mid to high range. So in that regard, that could lead to some different roster construction. But yeah, I mean, DJ definitely stands out as the best play in the field. Given that he's not like insanely expensive, it's not like he's like $13K. And if he would have been, in the same tournament 2 months ago, I mean, he would have been like 50% owned. So I'm curious Colin's opinion and curious what he thinks ownership will be between Kuchar and Dustin Johnson.
I think people will see Kuchar and Johnson as about having the same equity, which I think is actually about right. Kuchar has a little bit better history here, although DJ, I mean, he has like he finished twice here, like twice. So that's like, I mean, that is a point in DJ's favor for sure. I think all else being equal, I think Kuchar will maybe be like, if you give me like Kuchar's ownership versus DJ's, I think it's like Kuchar maybe like -3 in terms of percent owned. So I think people slightly prefer him just due to the cost savings. This is also another kind of weird tournament because like normally we get like at least like 5 or 6 guys that are 10K and above, and we have 3. And only one of them, Charlie Hoffman, is in the 10K range. So like I think both of that, like I think people are just gonna like I think people will gravitate towards theirs depending on like what savings they find elsewhere. And like if there's enough value to saturate it, then like the only place to spend it is Kuchar or DJ. It really like I just don't see people going like I don't know, maybe Pete, maybe you like some of the 9K guys a lot better, but like I think Finau's the only one that pops to me that has a chance.
But doesn't he pop like quite like I think Finau might be like one of the top 2 highest owned guys.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't bet against that at all.
Yeah.
But like, I'm just trying to figure out like where are people going to go on the top end? Like, I think it's going to be like, really the only places to go on the top end in my mind are DJ Kuchar, Hoffman, and Finau. Everyone else has like, you could, but like, there's nothing that compelling. So it may be another case where there's just a log jam of ownership at the top, and like, you accept that, and you either accept that or you try to go balanced, like with like a lot of 9K guys. But I don't know that I like enough of these 9K guys to fill out a roster around them.
Yeah, I don't love the 9K guys. I just like a lot of the guys like in the low 8K range. Just Grayson Murray coming off a win. He's capable of making a lot of birdies. Definitely a risky play. You got another kind of guy in a similar vein, Danny Lee, relative to the field, Gary Woodland at 7,900, who I like. It's Hudson Swafford at 7,800. So you start with Finau in your lineup, you kind of end up having, a similar amount of money to spend, and I can see the argument for doing that. But the reason that I think that might be a good play is because I think everyone else is going to pick everyone else is going to pick Kuchar or DJ because it's hard to spend the money without doing it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think like if you start with Finau though, like you're gonna at some point like you're gonna need to spend up more, and you just won't be able to. Like maybe you could justify doing it like by getting ownership down, but like I don't know. Like it depends on how much you like those 8K like or like low 8s, high 7s, like which we'll talk about in a bit.
I mean, maybe do you think the play like is going? You could go Finau, Hoffman, JB Holmes or something, and then you could get dipped down in the 7 range. But that gets you off Kuchar and DJ. It doesn't like kill your equity that much.
Yeah, like that's fine. Like it just depends on like I don't know how much like ownership savings you get like by going Hoffman over DJ. It'll really depend on like who like ends up getting touted more. Because I could honestly see Hoffman cracking 20% ownership like range.
Yeah, I'm really curious what people are going to do with Kuchar. Obviously, we'll have to see sort of like the tout recs and how that affects ownership. But we talked about him being a fade last week. He might be a fade this week, especially. I mean, I don't know. It's not like he's like short where you have to worry about that. But there are some guys who are a little bit just like right there in terms of being able to make birdies that are a little bit lower. So let's dip down just a little bit and talk about some of these guys 8-7K range. One guy that I do want to talk about just because his metrics pop, but it is over a short sample. Patrick Cantlay, if you're looking over his last 6 tournaments, he has a ridiculous plus 24.58 plus minus on DK, 100% consistency rating. If you're just looking at who is the best birdie maker in the field, he obviously has a small sample, but he's definitely a birdie maker. Colin, what are your thoughts on Cantlay? I mean, it is a small sample, but it's pretty impressive in the small sample size.
So you're going to hate me for this answer, but like small sample is a reason why I can't take a stance on him yet.
Okay.
He's not quite at the threshold yet. I'm sure he's like 1 or 2 tournaments away. Yeah. But I can't get there yet. I'd rather say I don't know than trying to fake it.
Take a hard stance. Yeah, that's fair. Pete, do you have any stance on him? He's the guy that it's really tough for me to figure out just because if he performs like he has been, then that's a very valuable golfer this week.
Yeah, well, I made a lineup pretty quickly just to get some heads-ups out there, and I did start with Finau and with all ththese 8K guys, and Cantlay's in there. It's the Grayson Murray, JB Holmes, Woodland. I mean, you can kind of fill it out. It zeroes out, and I'm intrigued by him at first glance. I'm really chasing birdies here. I have guys that are just crushing birdies relatively in this range, and that's kind of what I was referencing before. But, yeah, I think Cantlay's a good play. I feel more comfortable having a stance on him this week, just given that the field isn't as strong. And he's a highly touted up-and-coming player as well. So I feel pretty comfortable taking him relative to where I would be, with someone with such a small sample size. I think Colin is definitely right that you shouldn't have a strong opinion at this point. But given the field, given the setup, I think he's a pretty good play personally. For cash or GPPs or both? Potentially both. I mean, cash. I mean, I just again made a quick line. I'm not saying that he's a great cash game play at this point, but just on the little bit of research I did, he did pop quite a bit. So
Yeah.
We'll see. I'll have to dig into it a little bit more. But I'm a pretty big believer at this point. I've played him quite a bit on FanDuel. He's been chalk and cash games on FanDuel for a while, just because he came in super cheap. So.
Oh yeah, he was really down there.
Yeah, I mean, he was. This is a guy also. I mean, I don't know how much this matters to someone like Colin, but he was the number 1 amateur for 55 weeks. So I mean, he's a prestigious golfer.
He's the pedigree, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm a sucker for these young, talented guys, as we know. And my DeChambeau take was pretty bad for a while, but I guess he got a win. I don't know. We can come back to Bryson at some other
What is our total track record so far on young guys and up and comers?
The two guys I took stances on were DeChambeau and Rahm, and I feel really good about Rahm. DeChambeau seemed like a total bust, but
yeah, I feel like, but I feel.
And we were high on Xander.
Yeah, Xander we were high collectively.
And I think we sort of at least how he's playing right now. Trey Mullinax is another young guy who I like this week quite a bit.
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good track record on ascertaining the status of the young guns so far. And once there's enough data, there's some pretty solid stances.
Yeah.
Cantley in particular, not to spend too much time on one guy, but he's the guy that he had to take some time off with injury and had some personal tragedies. So he was really looking like he was going to be one of the studs on tour, especially when he was real young, 18, 19, 20. Was really trending in the right direction. And kind of gotten everything back together, and he's been playing really well. So I'm rooting for him personally. But just from a DFS perspective, I could see the argument that he doesn't have enough data, and I can also see the argument that this is a prestigious, golfer who's playing extremely well, and there's no reason to think that, he can't continue some sort of good trend.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a tough couple of years personally, but he definitely seems to be back and trending up. So definitely a guy I'm interested in. Keep on in the 7K range. Maybe the guy that I think is most interesting this week, which probably is no surprise. Colin, I'll let you talk about him. Ches, what are your thoughts on him?
Oh, just give me a reason. I'm good to go. I think probably one of the best histories in the field.
Yeah.
Histories in the field.
Yeah.
And that is pretty compelling. I think that the more interesting one is going to be how highly is he owned? Because, he's starting to get on tower radars again, and people are picking up on it. I'm of course happy for him. It's always good to see Ches back in the mix.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like his history here. I think, he's basically ever since mid-May, it's been one miscut and definitely upside to boot here.
Yeah.
Maybe semi-mediocre finishes at Travelers and Deer are going to keep people off of him. But I think he's from an equity standpoint, and a value standpoint, absolutely a viable play.
Oh yeah, he's a great play. Yeah, I think this range is going to be really interesting in terms of ownership because I just don't know if any of these guys are going to be super high owned. There's a lot of intriguing guys, at least for tournaments. We have Reeve Ches at 7.5, Luke List just 100 above him at 7.6. We have guys like Adam Hadwin at 7.4, Stuart Sink, who has been playing really well lately, 7.4, Gary Woodland at 7.9. Pete, you think any of these guys are going to be super chalky? Chad Campbell at 7.5. Do you think any of these guys are going to be super chalky?
I see Chad Campbell gaining ownership if he's touted enough. He's been playing really, really good golf. Again, something that I kind of look at to gauge ownership off the bat in the early part of the week is just the PGA Tour power rankings. Their power rankings are Kuchar, DJ, Finau, Charlie Hoffman, and then number 5, Chad Campbell. He's been.
And he has history here to boot. I think he has chalk in the forecast.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, and I think he makes a great cash game play. He's one of the guys that I was looking at immediately. So, I think it's an interesting week, in the regard that we don't have as many, household names, but I think because the DFS community's touting has such a big influence on ownership, we'll see him be really heavily owned.
Yeah. I mean, he's great recent form. He has a 69.8 recent adjusted round score, which is one of the better marks in the field for sure. I mean, what are your thoughts, Colin, on this mid-tier range just in terms of ownership? And we can even dip down into this high 6K range or just, I guess, the 6K range in general, because there are some interesting guys here as well. Trey Mullinax, who we just talked about in pretty good form. He has an even better recent adjusted round score of 69.2. Robert Garrigus is maybe a really low-owned potential play. He's got a really good recent adjusted round score as well. What are some of these guys, your thoughts on some ownership of these guys here, Colin?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to be Ches and Cat and Chad Campbell headlining at number one. I think after that, you could probably see some pretty standard mainstays. People are always on Ollie Schneiderjans these days.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily buy that. I've been off him for a while. It's been kind of a mixed bag, but just kind of one of those inexplicably popular ones. I think I could see people still being in Summer Hayes just because he's gotten popular recently. There is a disappointing finish at the Barbasol that's keeping his equity down in my numbers for a while, so I'm probably going to be off him. The angle we didn't talk about is where are the Canadians in the Canadian Open? I don't think that's a thing because if the number one guy that everyone's pointed to forever for that one is Grandelet, and he has straight up awful history here. I don't think people are going to be going that route again. You could maybe make a case for Adam Hadwin just because people have played him before and he has better history than Dillette to boot. It's maybe viable, but if he's over 10%, which I think he will be, I don't think he's a viable play. So yeah, I think that's I see those being the chalk guys, all else being equal.
Yeah, no, I think that's go ahead, Pete. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably true for sure. I'm not sure if any of these guys are going to be super chalk. Obviously, it's tough to tell. I think the highest owned guys are going to be the ones at the top, and then you could really afford to keep some equity down here at the bottom. Let's talk maybe our favorite guy that is going to be under 5%, which actually might be a really good golfer. Colin, what are your thoughts here?
I hate to go back to Lowell and kind of play all the classic hits, but you know who I really love right now is Luke List. I think he's on a price range that everyone's going to get priced out. I think he has really great history to boot. If you want to weight distance a little bit more, obviously he has it. And just his boom or bust nature is going to keep a lot of people off of him. But probably I think he's going to be under 5%. I think the fact that he keeps letting people down is going to keep people away from the well. This is the exact type of thinking that you got to avoid, saying if he sets up perfectly, he sets up perfectly. You need to take risk in the first place. And I don't mind loading up on him in a bunch of spots.
Yeah, he's going to be my guy, but go ahead, Pete.
I like him too. I was considering him as 1A or 1B, but the next guy that was in consideration, who is another classic hit, is Hudson Swafford.
Here's my second.
Well,
really close there. I mean, again, we're kind of going back to our pets here, but I like Hudson Swafford, decent course history here, good birdie maker, and I do like the distance guys a little bit just because of the birdie opportunities. So I'm going to take Hudson Swafford as my favorite guy, under 5%.
Man, those were my two guys. So, all right, let me try to come up with a guy right here. I'm going to go super contrarian, Michael Kim. Why not? 2 to 4% projected ownership, probably be less than that. He's at 6'6". So if you want to really go superstars and scrubs, he is a guy that's been playing okay recently. Is pretty good recent adjusted round score. And it was probably going to be really low at 6'6". He did make the cut last year in his only time here. So definitely has a chance to outperform expectations. All right, let's pick some winners here. Let's see. I guess I'll go first. I don't think I've gone first for a while. And then Pete, I'll give you second pick, and then Colin can round us out. I guess I'll go with DJ.
All right, give me Kuchar. Who you going, Colin?
All right, wait. I go second.
No, you're going third. You're going third.
Yeah,
we have DJ and Kuchar.
Yeah. Okay. I'll skip. All right. I'll just go Finau and keep it boring. All right. What's my cutoff?
Under 9K.
9K. Give me Gary Woodland. He's due.
All right. I'll take JB Holmes.
I like it. I'm gonna go Cantlay. Why not?
All right.
I'm in on Cantlay. All right. All right, sounds good. Thank you guys for listening or watching. As always, I hope you guys had a better weekend than some of us at the British Open, and I hope you guys also have a good weekend this weekend for the RBC Canadian Open. Thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you guys next week.